it needs to do this for a second, and then I'm gonna close it out. Just setting it up. All right.
So, hello everyone, welcome. My name is Lindsay Compton,
Sorry. Where is that coming from? There's another test here. I'm gonna close that. There we go. That was weird.
So anyway, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Society of Illustrators. Thank you for joining us for Generative AI and Image Creators, the Future of Artist Rights. My name is Lindsay Compton, and I'm the Deputy Director and Director of Programs and Partnerships. As artificial intelligence continues to transform how we create and consume images, artists and designers are facing urgent and complex questions about authorship, ethics, compensation, and the very nature of creativity. This town hall was organized with the hope that everyone will be feeling empowered with a clear understanding of the current landscape, the stakes involved, and practical insights to help navigate the evolving intersection of AI and the creative industries. We're fortunate to be joined by a distinguished panel of artists, designers, technologists, and advocates whose work sits at the crossroads of art, technology, and policy. So I'm gonna introduce Carl. Carl is an illustrator, creative entrepreneur, and founder of the visual storytelling studio Epic Made. Through his personal brand, Colorful Carl, he explores fine art, AI, and blockchain. He currently serves as the Eastern Regional Representative for the Graphic Artists Guild. And then we have Ismail Karabi Garcia on the screen here. He is the founder and co-leader of the Responsible Artificial Intelligence Network, also known as RAIN, and CEO of Kairoy, an AI ethics and governance consultancy. He brings a wide-ranging perspective from his experience in fintech, museums, theater, and academia. Then we have Tim O'Brien. He is an award-winning illustrator and with an extraordinary legacy of work, including numerous Time magazine covers and the iconic Hunger Games book series. Tim is the second longest serving president of the Society of Illustrators from 2015 to 2022 and has been adjunct professor at Pratt Institute. Tim is a leading voice in the effort to keep generative AI out of illustration competitions and uphold standards for original artistic creation. And then we have Rebecca Blake. She is a veteran graphic designer and former advocacy liaison for the Graphic Artists Guild, where she tracked legislation and authored numerous articles on copyright and visual artist rights. She also served on the board of ICOD, the International Council of Design, and ASCRL, the American Society for Collective Rights Licensing. She was recently hired by ASCRL as Senior Vice President for Interstate and Foreign Licensing and Business Development. And then here at the helm, we have Sir Michael Allen Galvez, is the Marketing Director of Creative and Digital Media at 54 Below and BFB Management, a photographer whose work has been published widely from Variety to Smithsonian Archives. He is also a founding member and co-lead of RAIN and serves as Associate East Regional Representative for the Graphic Artists Guild. We're looking forward to a thoughtful and nuanced discussion, and we encourage questions during the Q&A. And before I turn it over to Michael, I also just want to give Rachel Sheeran a shout out and thank you for making all the promo material for the event. We really appreciate that. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to our panelists.
Hi, good evening. Thank you guys for all being here, whether you're in person or online. I'll be your host this evening, and thanks, Lindsay, for that wonderful brief introductions for all of us here. I just want to say it's my absolute pleasure to be here with you all and our three panelists, four panelists, yes, 3 in person and 1 online, joining us. To set the stage, I'd just like us to look back at what led us to this moment in this room currently. In 2021, the world found out that over 5 billion images were scraped from the web and included into data sets to train several text-to-image generative artificial intelligence models. This was done without consideration of copyrights nor compensation. disruption caused by generative AI in the creative industries is vast, and it is no exaggeration to say that generative AI poses a once in a lifetime existential issue to the status quo we currently all enjoy. Use cases of generative AI have caused a concern and have found themselves across headlines through different outlets for the last 4 years. Some of these include articles surrounding lawsuits like Anderson versus Stability AI et al., Getty Images versus Stability AI, Goldsmith versus Andy Warhol Foundation. All of these revolving around using those data sets of scraped images that was just mentioned. If you're local to the area, you might have even seen or heard about the picket lines that were downtown in Hudson Yards in 2023, when the Writers Guild of America and the Screen Actors Guild held a joint strike out of concerns over the use of generative AI in the writer's room and also in capturing our actors' likenesses to use forever without what they feel is proper consent and fair compensation. By the way, if this is all foreign to you, do not worry, you can ask all of our panelists here in the Q&A later that's coming up. So more recently, just last week, it's been reported that the news website Business Insider laid off 21% of its workforce. Across all departments, a number of them also being writers, so that the company can go, in their words, all in on AI. On the flip side of this, US courts have sided with artists and ruled that images generated by AI cannot be copyrighted, which sets a remarkable legal precedent for all of the challenges to come. There are also several responsible use cases for artificial intelligence in the arts. One such use case is actually in the realm of art authentication, where AI is being trained to recognize forgeries to great degrees of accuracy, bringing a powerful tool in potentially protecting artist compensation and copyright. Another great use case will be detailed by one of our panelists in just a few minutes. I believe that the blog article published by the Institute of Computing and Cyber Systems by Michigan Tech summarized this entire situation at its best, directly from their words. If an AI can be trained to steal billions of images from the internet, an AI can also be trained to recognize unlicensed and copyrighted works and choose not to include them in the same dataset. However, the predatory AI utilized here is evolving faster than the guardrails. Big AI corporations have financial resources that artists do not. Hard to sugarcoat this. This is a big mess, right? Further complicating this is the involvement of government. Last year, the European Union across the pond adopted the Artificial Intelligence Act, a first of its kind common regulatory framework that details the risks of AI and aims to provide a more ethical way forward. Critics argue that the AI Act doesn't go far enough, but I believe that it's a significant step forward. In the United States, only a handful of state-level governments have been able to enact some form of legislation related to artificial intelligence. If you look at the federal level, the picture gets even bleaker. Just last week, the House passed its version of the budget reconciliation bill known as the One Big Beautiful Bill, which contains a provision freezing regulation of artificial intelligence in the country for the next 10 years. Now, that's a lot of information. And while we can't cover everything tonight, we will try to center our discussion on a few main points. One, will the use of generative AI stay predatory to artists like the way it started, or will our shared future see a more ethical and responsible regulatory framework put into place? One that makes creativity more human again. How will sociocultural and legal efforts play a role in protecting our work and our rights? And this is exceedingly important. What can we all do in the meantime as individuals? So that's where we seem to be in the present moment. Wow. So Carl, how do you feel about all of this? I'm gonna throw it right at you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated thing, like you said, there's the first and foremost thing that needs to be said, like you said, earlier is that these data sets were made very unethically, right? We have copyright law for a reason, and nobody in these data sets were given consent. They were or compensation or credit, and that's the mantra that I think we've been repeating, and I think it's really important to stand on that. That said, I see two sides of this. It's definitely hurting the creative economy. The bottom level of this, entry level artists right now are probably in the worst space they've been in terms of being able to get a paying gig, whether you're a designer or an illustrator, all that sort of stuff that we thought Fiverr was a big problem originally. This is that on steroids, right? I see on a production side of things though, like on the agency level, right? So I own a creative agency. We do animation, illustration work, and I see a future where my small team can produce much larger projects based off the data set that we can build in-house that references work that we own and did, right? So in my head, there's a space here soon where we're going to be able to make keyframes and characters concepts and develop our story, and it's going to help us do it quicker, better, faster with my same team. So I think that that's really powerful. But on the other side are these huge corporations going to now demand 10x of the staff and use less people and do big layoffs? Like, it's the double-edged sword, right? So where does that come to a precipice? And that's sort of kind of the whole conversation thing. But what we're really trying to figure out, how do we protect our colleagues in the meantime, and figure out how do we navigate this the best way possible. So.
Yeah, could you, so I love all of that, but also could you, I know personally, that you have some experience with, responsible use cases of this. Can you tell us the details of that and just, is there a responsible use case for this in the arts?
Sure. I mean, the project you're talking about is a passion project of mine. So, having that foresight, knowing generative AI is here. I own a company and I have to make sure that we make enough money to pay the bills and take care of everybody's family that works for me, right? Like, I take that very seriously. And there's no world where it's like, oh, well, I can lay off half of them and get that. That's just not how I'm wired. But, some people are. But so in that space, I'm experimenting, right? Like, I want to understand this technology. So I started doing research on what are called LoRa models, and LoRa models are low-rate adaptation models that are a smaller data set that sits on top of like a stable diffusion model, which again is not an ethical model, but this is sort of derivative of that. So again, a step in the right direction, I think. But I took all of my father's paintings. My father was a watercolor artist and did these amazing, visceral, just like emotional, abstract, crazy paintings. And I collected 700 of his works of art from his whole lifetime. He was from here in New York as well. And I put them all into a LoRa model and created this thing that now generates artwork again for my father. And the first time I did it, I just started crying. It was beautiful. And it's like, there's something there that's really magical, but like, what is that? And that's like a post-human creation, but like, it's not really my father, but it felt like it, So I don't know. I think but that owning that data set and all that stuff that went into it, I own the intellectual property rights of. So that is a more ethical approach and a step in the right direction, right? So
Yeah. Thanks for that, Carl.
yeah. Sorry. One day I'll be able to talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah, no, I got
getting
you.
emotional.
I got you. So, I had to prompt you for it. What about you, Ismail, from the beautiful land of Canada?
Hi everyone, Ismail here, calling in from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, Canada. You can tell from my accent. I'm on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I wanted to say, above all, well, just start with a huge thank you to the Society of Illustrators for hosting the Responsible Artificial Intelligence Network for the first hybrid event outside of the UK. And a huge thanks to everyone at the Graphic Artists Guild who's helped get this event together. I hope we do many more. Now, I do want to give just a moment to the fact that I am joining online. This is quite an unfortunate turn of events. I really wanted to be there in person. Would have been my first time in the States. Would have been wonderful to see New York and meet all the panelists and all the audience there. But there've just been too many problems coming out of airports in the US recently, and really didn't feel like it was the safest thing to do. Now, even though that's an aside, it is unfortunately the framing of a lot of today's discussion. We saw at President Trump's inauguration in January that he had some of the world's most powerful men in the world of AI lined up behind him. And this might be part of an argument for the challenging of the uninformed use of generative AI tools in the arts and beyond. When you use them, there are real power dynamics that are being reinforced through their use. But I think echoing a bit of what Carl said, I don't want to get too carried away with, it's not that we shouldn't use these tools. My question is always going to be, how can we use these tools thoughtfully? What are the conditions that allow us to use these tools properly? And I'm sure we'll hear more from the audience and from the panelists as to how they're used. Yeah, they can definitely replace clunkier tools, help brainstorm, test ideas, overcome small budgets, like Carl just mentioned. And I'm going to propose two responses to what the conditions are that allow us to use AI in the arts. So firstly, artists, and I might be putting a bit too much pressure on all of you, I'm sorry, but I think you need to find the resources to help improve your literacy, your ability to critically evaluate use cases. And I will repeat this, I think, throughout the call today. I really genuinely think that you making it to today's event or watching this video online, on repeat or live, you're doing part of that. You're trying to join the conversation. Secondly, we all have a role to shape the policies, the governance of AI models, AI use cases, whether that's at governmental levels or organizational levels. And ultimately, underpinning everything I say today is the notion that art results from a creative process whereby we bring something into existence. And this process, to me, is just fundamentally human. So really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ismail. That was great. What about you, Tim?
First, thanks for all the people that came to Society tonight. It's great to see you in person. For everyone listening, thank you for taking the time. It could be one of the least sexy things to talk about in a given moment, but it's very, very important. I want to say that I'm here not as a representative of the Society of Illustrators or the Illustration Conference, which I'm the vice president of, or Pratt Institute, or the H, or any other organization. I'm here as a freelance illustrator with a long career. And I'm also offering my own thoughts. This is not my own self-interest. Though I think it's fine for everyone to speak to their own self-interest. I'm doing this mostly because I'm an educator and I care about the future of our industry. And I care about people who want to be illustrators. And I care about the arts and the purity of arts. And I've been alarmed by the generative AI outputs, like most people have. The AI hype perpetrated by corporations, by the media, by Adobe, by every social network, and every search now has a button encouraging you to press it. And I've been on numerous panels discussing AI, the dangers of it, the implications of it, and I have some pretty hardened positions that haven't changed from the moment I first saw it. I don't think it's possible to engage with generative AI in any way if one believes that it was built immorally and illegally. I don't think one needs to learn how to use it to be against it. I don't think one needs to learn ChatGPT or Midjourney to think that these output of these text to image word extruders are in fact not generating meaningful additions to humankind. The argument that generative AI is here, the toothpaste out of the tube, the horses out of the barn, is not a reason to value it or make it part of an illustrator's workflow. We do have to respond to it though. And we do have We don't have to use it, we don't have to celebrate it, or use text image tools. It's embedded in Photoshop now, there's no reason you have to use it. Just be stuck for a moment. Be willing to not know something for a second. I oppose the casual acceptance of generative AI in our day-to-day work as illustrators. Like, I think any seasoned illustrator or art director who posts experiments with text to image generators is a grand disappointment. We all need to call that behavior out, and it's not easy. Because some of these people are our friends, and also there's sometimes art directors we don't want to work with. But there's a polite way of doing it by saying you really, really admire that person. And you think that that kind of activity is beneath them, it's beneath their quality of their work. There should be a way that we can always have that reaction so that we can continue to make it less than cool. The one thing that has changed in the past few years is it's not cool. It's now cemented as less than great. When something is discovered to be made by AI, public hate, they call it out. And that's our role, primary role as illustrators, is to sort of call it out and have that opinion. I'll cut it off there, I kind of came in hot, but I think this conversation today is the beginning of us having these things in public. We haven't really talked about it as an organization here at the Society of Illustrators. Anyway, that's my position.
I appreciate that, Tim. Like, I think it's very important to, talk about this passionately, because, as I feel like the entire point of the talk is to make sure that everyone comes out informed in a way to make sure that everyone has a way forward, right? So I appreciate all the thoughts that we've had so far for our three panelists. Lastly, Rebecca, what do you think about all of this so far?
So I have so many thoughts. I just want to be really clear. Again, I'm speaking as myself, much like Tim. I'm not speaking for ASCRL. I'm not speaking for the Graphic Artists Guild. Although I do have to say that my opinions are certainly formed by 30+ years on the board of ASCRL and over 15 years working with the International Council of Design. So many thoughts about this, but the huge thing I think what we need to consider is, one, generative AI just fell on us like a thunderclap. This was part of a decades-long reduction in artists' rights that has existed as the tech sector has developed. We need to understand how we got here historically. We need to understand that germane to this entire discussion on generative AI, should one use generative AI? How can one use generative AI ethically and responsibly? How can we develop best professional practices of generative AI? Because unfortunately, it is not going to go away. And the artists have to be the ones to develop the professional practices and the ethical standards, even as I agree with Tim that you have to hold your nose because the base model was unethically sourced. But as we approach this, we need to understand this is part of a larger labor issue. And I am standing on my Graphic Artists Guild Labor Union Trade Association roots when I say this. There has been a transfer of wealth across every industry that has occurred over decades. And we are part and parcel of this. Every single illustration that you make is of value, which is why people want to take it and use it, and why they don't want to pay you for it, because they can't afford to pay you for it. The AI image generators will even say that we couldn't possibly license all the images we need in order to develop this platform. But if we want to effectively advocate for ourselves as working professionals, working artists, then we have to understand the boring stuff that we have been ignoring for years, which is the copyright behind it, which is the labor issues behind it, which is the transfer of wealth, which is the technology that has stripped your ability to control your work. Case in point, Meta built their AI model on all of those images that everybody's been happily uploading to Facebook and Instagram. And Facebook and Instagram, lo and behold, strip your metadata out. If you're sensible, if you're putting your metadata into your illustrations, you should. It's one way you can control. It's called copyright management information. There's tutorials on it. Embed your metadata. Social media platforms strip it out, ostensibly because it increases the file size. That's bullshit. They have enabled larger and larger images to be uploaded. Do not tell me 2 kilobytes of metadata is going to be the deal breaker for them. It is stripped out so you cannot tell where your images are being used. All of those images uploaded, no metadata, difficult to source, is what Meta used to develop their AI platform. And if you signed on to Facebook or Instagram, you gave Meta the right to do that. Because the terms of use give them broad sub-licensing rights, and that includes for generative AI. This is what I mean about how we have to pay attention to the boring stuff. Because we have things of value, we have our ability to create and the creations we produce. And that is being stolen because we have, to an extent, left ourselves defenseless. So I think we need to understand that this is a moment at which we can start seizing control of that. I am hugely pessimistic at this point on our ability to protect ourselves with generative AI because of the sea change that has occurred in the political landscape since January. The elections have consequences. It is no coincidence. The Copyright Office put up their third report in generative AI that said you cannot assume that using creative works for text and data mining to train your systems is a fair use. That is what the tech sector wanted. Lo and behold, the following Saturday, the Register of Copyrights is illegally fired. No coincidence there. There's absolutely no coincidence there. But having said that, I gain hope from articles about how generative AI is producing garbage, because guess what? It is feeding on garbage, because guess what? The majority of people using generative AI to produce images are people who aren't artists, who don't have the passion, don't have the skills, don't have the training, didn't put in the hard work, and are putting in little text prompts and producing candy-colored, soft focus garbage that is now swamping the internet. And this is what the generative AI is feeding on. This is a chance for us to start leveraging the value of the work we do, the originality of the work that we do, and hopefully gain some traction. But it is going to be a very difficult road to hoe with who we have in the White House and the lack of action on the part of Congress. So that's how I generally feel about it. Pissed off, somewhat pessimistic, but I'm seeing opportunity.
Okay, so I guess from this, it feels like out of all industries, a number of artists feel like the creative industry is getting the brunt of the consequences, right, of this AI revolution. Do you feel that this is true? And if so,
Yes.
I figured you would say that. That's why it is a follow-up. And if so, why do you think that art or creativity or however you call it?
Because
It's feeling like-
creativity is hard.
Okay.
That is why. Because to produce, and by the way, this applies to musicians, it applies to writers, it applies to photographers, it applies to software engineers. There's an art to software engineering. There's discipline and dedication to software engineering. The act of creation is difficult, and it is a stony path with personal failure after personal failure after personal failure. You're working, you're like, holy crap, I put the nose in the wrong place. I mean, I've done that before. And then these wonderful things where it all comes together and a beautiful work comes out. And this is what we do for a living, but it is hard. And the rest of the world wants it easy because it's a value. They want the value without extending the effort.
That's a a nice little zinger there at the end. But I feel like Carl has a response.
Well, I just, in that same vein, I think, the difference, I saw a report that basically said, the arts, programmers, even legal counsel, they're gonna take big hits from generative AI. Both on the language side and the visual side, right? And, but I think artists have historically been undervalued and disenfranchised a lot more than, say, high-paid programmers and high-paid attorneys. So we were already in a bad spot relative to some of these other places, and now we're getting hit by this as well. So I think there's an added insult to injury there in the first place that, should be also looked at, I think, or to take into consideration. So.
Tim, do you have thoughts about this?
Yeah, I have some thoughts about this. I think that to think that we are the only sector that is being harmed is wrong. There are all kinds of entry-level jobs all over the world that people counted on just to survive.
Yep.
And those are being cut away every day. So and there are sectors of illustration that are immediately affected, and those would be animation, and any kind of process work like that.
Concept art.
I do feel like the guardrails held in publishing. So I want to say that I'm not completely pessimistic. I'm quite impressed with how authors demanded that AI not be involved with their projects, which pushed publishers to change their contracts to not allow AI. And this is happened at almost every major publisher. If you use AI, you have to tell them you used it and how much, but you're not allowed to generate a cover. And that is just sort of the way it's going to be for a while. And that's a really encouraging thing. Also, people take personal pride in what they do, and no one's running around taking victory laps for pressing a button. And anytime someone sort of talks about using it, it's always a bit of like reluctant, like, well, I had to, it's all filled with shame. So I don't think that our industry is particularly hit more than other people, but I do feel like it's easy to show this. It's hard to talk about a data processor, but you could show images that are generated. And as we all remember, Lenza in about 2022 was asking people to upload all their photos so that they could make illustration avatars for themselves. And I was seeing all the people I went to high school with uploading all their photos and making very reasonable portraits of themselves. And it made me nauseous.
Mm-hmm.
It made me nauseous for anyone who wanted to be an illustrator.
Yeah.
And that alarm changed over time because it's sort of cemented in our industry as a thing you play with. It's a novelty.
Yeah, I feel like the current trend is doing versions of Studio Ghibli inspired artwork that's coming out of image generators.
Yeah,
So-
that trend is called crime.
Mhm. So, Ismail, I know, from personal experience that you have a lot of thoughts about this. What do you think?
I'll only add one thing and agree with almost everything already said. The only thing I'll add is it's been surprising. I think that might make it more impactful on the design sector, on the illustration, on the arts. It's been surprising that we've gone from, hey, we can use large language models to underpin text-to-text generators, so AI chatbots, to help you write emails quickly or help write resumes and cover letters, to oh, we did the boring stuff. Now we're going to do the creative stuff too, because no one likes drawing or doing art. It's been a really surprising shift in the rhetoric. It's been we were automating things we don't enjoy, and now we're automating literally the only thing keeping most of us like interested in life. We're human. We create things. We enjoy the process of creation. You might be as boring as me and just enjoy writing a report on AI, Or you might be, you know, everyone in that room will be actual artists. That to me is what's been most impactful. It's not that it's worse for the arts, it's that it's such a surprising turn and so unnecessary.
I'd like to comment on that,
Yeah.
I feel like, what Rebecca said, that, there's a lot of garbage kind of going into these data sets now as they grow. And more garbage coming out, and I'm less doom and gloom than some people might be. Because I think at the end of the day, like, AI is never gonna generate really innovative, amazing, nuanced things that an artist could create. Like, it'll do something really fast, and it might be like beautiful-ish noise, but it's not gonna innovate, it's not going to create something that has a deep, meaningful aspects to it like real art has. Unless there's a real artist really infusing themselves into that experience, and then, oh, but there's an artist there. But to Tim's point, like, there should be great pride still that people take at any point going, I don't use any AI for this. This is all analog, I do this with watercolor and colored pencil. Like, I think that's gonna have more and more value as we have more and more AI generated crap. The people that really hone their traditional skills, I think, is gonna have an amazing value moving forward. You can't really emulate that, even with, the printing technologies and stuff they have. Like, I think people appreciate that wabi-sabi of the art and the handmade details, so. I don't know if I used that word, in the correct enunciation, but.
No, that's a very interesting point, and I think on a societal level, is there a world, or is there one thing that we think someone, or whether an organization, a government, can do that starts or catalyzes an ethical framework of AI in this society, in the United States? Is that something that we think is doable? Is that something, how will that look like? What is that, what is that first action that triggers that? Rebecca or Tim?
I think I heard you open your mouth before I did.
But it's something I put a lot of thought to. When I was on the board of the International Council of Design, we actually developed a code of professional practices for designers, and feels like you're putting on the set of obligations. But what we can realize is when you develop a code of professional conduct, professional practices, you actually empower yourself. You elevate yourself to, you become the partner and the advisor of your clients, because you are coming from this point of standing. I think that is what is needed in general in every creative discipline, but I think generative AI really puts the crux on it. For example, Tim talked about LoRa's. These are fine-tuning models where you can use as little as 10 or 20 images, and you can develop a model that will then generate images in the style of a certain illustrator. So an illustrator who's spent 10, 20 years developing, crafting their own original style, all of a sudden will see the internet swamped with images that look like they could have made them. They have lost their unique value proposition, which is their vision, because somebody developed a LoRa that they are now selling based on training on their materials. This is a really clear example where, if you are a visual artist, is it ethical to use somebody else's work to develop a fine-tuning model? I think we all can say, no, it isn't ethical, but we should be the ones to go ahead and say that. And I wanted to propose that we have this concept in the United States called fair use. You guys have probably heard of it. Fair use is the reason why a rap artist can sample Roy Orbison's Pretty Woman and come out with this amazing piece of work, which is a commentary on Pretty Woman, and takes it in a totally different level, because they have now imbued this work with new expression, new meaning. And most importantly, they are not competing with the original work. They are not hurting the estate of Roy Orbison, which derives a value from that. This is all under this concept of fair use. Fair use is how we have beautiful collage work. Fair use is how we have beautiful montages. Fair use is how illustrators can incorporate copyrights in their work, but if they generate something that is new expression, new meaning, new vision, new creative decisions, then that passes over into an area where it is considered a fair use of that work. There is no bright line, you know, hop back and forth, and this is fair use and this isn't fair use. It's
It
a
flows.
grade.
Yeah.
But the fair use concept, when somebody evaluates, is this use of somebody else's work a fair use or not? There are 4 factors that are considered. And this, by the way, is the case in every single copyright infringement case where somebody says, oh, I got to use that because that's fair use. Those 4 factors have to be considered each time. And the first factor is, I always have to look this up because I get it always mixed up. The first factor is the purpose and character of the use. This is where this idea of transformation, expression, and meaning comes into place. Have you imbued what you have created with such originality that it is a new work, even though you've used this? The second one is the nature of the copyrighted work. If you're creating something that is factual, facts have less copyright. They're not original, they're facts, versus something that is entirely creative. So if you are using works that are entirely factual and then building from it, then that tends to help more with a fair use decision. Doesn't mean you pop across into a little area where you're in this little magical fair use land. It just means that it'll help support you. The next one is the amount and the substantiality of what you use. Have you used the entire work? Which, by the way, is a really pissy thing with the AI image generators. So the only way they can work is by ingesting the entire image. Have you used the entire work? Have you used a piece of the work? And if you only used a little piece of the work, have you used the heart of the work? If anybody ever tells you it's okay if you just use 20% of something, it's a fair use bullshit. Because if that 20% is the heart of the work, it is not a fair use. And then the last thing is the effect on the potential market. Have you hurt the original artist? We can take these 4 factors and then use them as a framework for developing ethical practices with generative AI. But in order for generative to develop professional practices that have any standing, the first question that has to be asked is generative AI being used as a tool or is it a crutch? Could you get where you're going to go without it? Have you brought that much originality into it? And the very last thing I want to say on this, the Copyright Office has done a really, really interesting analysis of generative AI and copyrightability. And what they have said is that a work has to be generated by a human being in order to have copyright. This is built on decades of pre-existing law. Believe it or not, there was somebody who tried to get some text copyrighted by the Copyright Office that they said had been dictated to them by celestial beings. And the Copyright Office said, I'm so sorry, but gods are not human and therefore we're not granting any copyright status. I kid you not, that has actually happened. People try to have works created by elephants, try to get a snapshot taken by a monkey, all to be copyrighted, and all of those copyrights were rejected. So there is a long precedent that goes behind the Copyright Office saying it has to be a work of human creation. Having said that, Copyright Office did grant registration to a work entirely created on a generative AI platform. It's a piece of god-awful work called a single piece of American cheese. Hideous. Why did they grant it? Because the individual who created it, who owns actually a generative AI company, so they wanted to actually have a use case. The person who did it imbued so much decision-making and creativity into using that platform. A long iterative series of prompts, taking the output, manipulating it on platform, taking segments of it, reposition things. And not only did they do that, where there was decision-making every step of the way, they documented it with a video so they could show to the Copyright Office. It is a hideous piece of work. It's seriously ugly. But it fulfills the Copyright Office's requirement for human creativity and, most importantly, intention. Not like I put in a single string of words and look, I got a rainbow colored pony out of it. But actual intention going towards a goal. And that's the difference in it. So all of this, I think, is what needs to be considered as we develop professional practices, and ethical practices. And the point is to protect artists and to protect the culture of what we're creating.
Dan, did you have a additional thoughts?
Additional, I don't know, additional. you said a lot. That was great.
You can tell me
That was
that.
great. No, great, very well. I'm a realist illustrator and I do a lot of, covers where I need elements. And to do that, I have to do some, reference searching, I have to purchase images. If I'm working for a client, like Time Magazine, they'll acquire the rights to images from, very great photographers that have access to people that I don't have access to. And people are being paid along the way. The cost of the illustration to the publisher is way more than my fee. It's my fee plus all those other rights being purchased. If generative AI paid for the usage of all the images it used, then it could be ethical. Then it would be competitive, because it would be expensive to churn out a inaccurate image and, oh, that's not right, I'll do it again. $1,500. That's how it should work. Because it doesn't exist without the work that we've made. Any generator that generates music won't exist without music being put in. Any image generator won't exist without images going in. It's all been stolen. And so the only way I see it working is if there's compensation. If there's no compensation, it's not fair. Now, if anyone wants to give away all their work, artists should have the right to say, yeah, you can have all my work. And they should be able to say, I decided I don't want you to have it. I changed my mind. I was crazy last week. So that should be revocable. And I'm not ridiculous. I don't think it would ever happen. So I just don't see it as a viable moral decision for any society. Now, it doesn't stop. I'm against assault weapons. I don't think anything I can say can make them go away. No, but the fact that some people use them isn't a reason to suddenly change your opinion about them. So we're in this like difficult moment here where some people think it's fine, and we're gonna find out how much our art director friends really love us. in the next 5 years, because we love them, we really do. They've provided us careers. Me, for 35 years, they provided me a career. And I've broken my back and my heart and my knuckles for them, and I continue to do it. And there's a whole new generation of people who are willing to do the same thing. Yeah, I just don't. I don't think I think there are things that could work. I think compensating artists would be a good start.
Yeah, I'd love to comment on several of those things. On the art director side, I've heard several stories and talked to several art directors through my agency as I work in the world, and there was a phase where they thought they could just hire prompters to do things for them, and what they found out is they might be able to get a great image very quickly, better than normal, in a faster time, but these people that are prompting that are not already super talented artists that are crazy good at Photoshop and can do all the things that they can make those images without the prompting, have no acute control over the details. They can't do the things they need to do, and it just causes them more frustration and delays, and then finally just having to circle back and actually hire an artist. So I don't think we're gonna lose our jobs there. I think the technology is gonna get better, but again, I think the training and the skill that artists have is going to make us the best at using these technologies, because the marketplace, unfortunately, is going to demand us to interact with these things on some level. I think there's going to be new positions where people if you're an in-house artist at a company, I think you don't have as much say if you're a freelancer per se, where you go, hey, look, I'm not going to use these things as part of my brand. It's who I am. We do it this way. But the fact of the matter is, I know you don't like the toothpaste out of the tube analogy, but I don't know how we get back to another place. I think the shame methodology is great. I think, coming up with a better ethical data set is something that we should do. There are organizations working on collective licensing. I don't know if those are solutions. It's not going to replace, $100,000 a year of income for illustrators, but it's going to create data sets where people can put their information into it, give them compensation, credit, and consent, and be paid as it's licensed out from. And I think organizations will pull that off, but to the same kind of mentality that you're speaking of, like, hey, people should have shame for using these things. We should collectively come together and go, hey, let's demand as a people an ethical data set and companies to use that, and then try to build a movement, I think, trying to support that. It might be woefully optimistic, but I mean, if we're gonna fight the fight, like, let's come up with a solution that might have a chance. I don't know what the other solutions are, other than things that are just wholly built on smaller data sets for local things that companies themselves own entirely. Yeah.
Yeah, so as Ismail, I wanna punt this question to you. Like, it's essentially the same question as everyone, but I wanna frame it in the sense that as someone who runs an AI ethics and research governance consultancy, have you either encountered, do you have any ideas about the specific topic of how, in your experience, is there that ethical framework that are already in existence, or you've already maybe worked with?
The answer is usually no. Either I don't know about it or it's not there.
But what would you do?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about what we're trying to solve here is use AI better if we want to use those tools at all. And that presupposes a sort of top-down approach to policy and governance making. So I would work with an organization, and the manager who happens to have a bit of funding and happens to care about a bit about responsible AI will say, okay, we want to come up with a policy. And they'll say, great, who else is part of the conversation? And they'll say, well, no one, I'm just hiring you to come in and do it. And I'll say, yeah, no, okay, I'll walk away. Like, this is a waste of time. Like, I'm happy to take the money, I need it, but you're not going to get any value for it if we write a policy together. I deliver 3 or 4 presentations, write a policy, put it on their intranet, and never talk about it again. What I think is missing, and going back to the initial question, okay, is there some sort of global policy? Is there a sector-wide policy we could create together? Whatever we create has to be done with the input of artists, illustrators, whatever subsection of the art sector we want to work with. And the process needs to be inclusive. The people in this room, in the room that I can't see, I'm sure you're all very lovely. I don't know how many people there are, but you all need to have these discussions where you're able to question what there is already. So what's Alora? Question what the impact of putting more AI generated images out there. Understand what all of the copyright and fair use policy conditions that Rebecca pointed to. We need a deep understanding of this, and generally we can call whatever this understanding is AI literacy. Okay, and I genuinely think that I'll say this again. Your coming to this event is an interest in improving your AI literacy. The thing with AI literacy, so it is on the one hand, no one knows what it is, so please don't ask me any follow-up questions, Michael. But secondly, it's not got to do with AI, it's got to do with the specific industry, sector, organization, and that's the conversation I would have. Now, the Graphic Artists Guild, you have a statement on responsible AI. Society of Illustrators, you have the statement of responsible AI. The next step, if it hasn't been done already, and I'm not assuming that it hasn't been done, is to ensure that everyone who comes into the organization who wants to be part of your conversations is exposed to that policy and is explained why it matters, why it's important, but also maybe the policy needs updating as the community grows and changes and shifts. So that to me is what might be missing in a question about, again, going to the client. That always exists, and that's the easiest one to find. I want to come up with a policy. It's just me, the CTO, and I'm like, yeah, you're not of any interest. You're not going to actually succeed in responsible AI at your organization. Whereas, as Society of Illustrators, Graphic Artists Guild, us at the Royal Society for the Encouragement of the Arts, Manufacturers and Commerce, we can bring people together, we can create policies that respond to their interests and defend their interests and evolve as their interests also evolve. Long-winded, somewhat confusing response. Thanks.
No, I think that you've actually touched, and this is a very good segue to the last very quick question I was gonna ask the panel here before we open the floor for any of these questions. Yeah, I'm trying. So I think the big thing, right? The big question that I kind of said was exceedingly important at the beginning is that, you know, we talk about AI literacy, we talk about current policy initiatives, but what can artists as individuals do now immediately on their own to pragmatically move forward and not fall into either a cycle of despair or a certain optimism? Could each of you give us 1 to 3 easily actionable items that anyone in this room right now or online can do within the next week or even the next month? Whoever wants to go first on that.
I get it. Copyright your work. If you,
Yeah.
pretty easy, believe it or not, it's pretty easy to do, you get sort of used to doing it, and I made a lot of money defending those copyrights. So it's worth the effort. If you show it, copyright it, put it online, copyright it. The founders knew it was important for creative people to be able to profit from their creations. It's part of the beginning of this country, what they thought would work. And so we'll see how many of those people in Washington really care about the founders now. Support efforts to disrupt generative AI. That means using things like Nightshade and Glaze. Fuck it up a little bit. And add metadata, as said before. And I don't like the word shame because it's sort of an aggressive action, but I think we should speak out when you see it being casually used. If you're walking, if you don't use the button on Photoshop to generate something. They'll notice that no one's using it if we don't use it. When you use iStock photo, don't generate a photo, just look a little longer for something that's not perfect. The more we engage with it, the more we casually start using it, that's the slope. And I'm worried about that. So I think being against it vocally, publicly is where we should always be. That goes for the uncomfortable thing. It's just like, or as an organization, if you would, one part of your organization teaches people how to use it, incorporate it into their workflow, and the other part of it, the organization feels like you should set up guardrails, then you lose your moral authority to do that. So maintain your moral authority by being against it. And it's not a Luddite's position, it's a thoughtful position. Those are just some 3 basic things, and I'm sure we'll hear some better things.
I have a couple of things. I think the principles of being successful in art has always been about building yourself up and building a brand and making someone enjoy the idea of working with you and getting a piece of your work. Those things are never going to go away. So the value of someone scraping, let's say Tim's amazing illustrations into Allura and generating a new one, that's not going to resonate with the same value as someone who actually commissioned Tim for a piece of art. So the principles of building yourself up as an artist are not changing and are more important than ever. I also, being a huge fan of technology, while I super support copyright, and that is the fundamental piece of this, there are some additional things that you can use in things like blockchain technology. Now, I know people have a bad, NFTs in themselves have a bad rap, especially in the creative community. I think they're massively misunderstood, and there's a lot of grifting that went on in the space in the past few years. But the long story short is you can create an immutable record for fractions of a penny of all of your official works of art on your website in moments. And that's very powerful, and that would stand up very powerfully in court. So those are things that you can use to protect yourself in this space moving forward. And I'm happy to share those thoughts with people and get into the weeds of any of that with anybody at any time. So I'm a huge advocate for that space. But yeah, just copyright your work, protect your work, build yourself up like you would. There's a lot of doom and gloom out there. Just, you got to stay positive. Like, people do art because they love it and they're passionate about it. And don't let this stuff deter you from that. You'll find a way if you're passionate enough and you keep trying, you keep figuring it out and you don't quit. Like, you can do it. So I don't want people to not want to be artists because it seems terrible out there. Like, you can figure it out, and there's a community that will help you. So then join organizations like the Guild, be a part of the Society of Illustrators. It's always Graphic Artists Guild. We're out there banding together with different opinions, trying to make all the things work for each other. Like, we're a community. So that's a path forward.
Ismail, do you have anything as I position myself into the audience?
Of course I do. I always have something. First of all, you already did it. You came to this event. So congratulations. Second thing you're going to do is share this event once it's recorded and online. That's always helpful. Third of all, and emphasizing the really important part of Michael's question, how do we avoid fear and undue excitement about AI? You need to read up. You need to understand what on earth AI is. You need to find the communities. Yes, to what Carl said, find the artistic communities to improve yourself as an artist. That's perfect. We need to keep doing that, but also find the communities having meaningful conversations about AI. So today, Responsible AI Network, Society of Illustrators, Graphic Artists, we're coming together, we're making the space. But also there's the AI Now Institute, there's the Algorithmic Justice League, and there's the Distributed AI Research Institute. Those are 3 organizations out of the US. Look them up. AI Now Institute report from yesterday was beautiful, and it was about the power dynamics underpinning AI, which are just so much more important than, oh, when did they last update this tool? Or, oh, can I use it on Google search now? So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Rebecca.
Yeah, so echoing what other folks have said here, I just want to make one little correction. As soon as you put something in tangible form, including as a digital piece of work, it's copyrighted to you. And fun fact, Tim, the only place in the US Constitution where the word right appears is in the passage on copyright. But what you do need to do is register your copyrights with the Copyright Office in order to be able to protect them. And while it is true that blockchain can certainly show an immutable record of your ownership, you can't bring a copyright infringement lawsuit until you've registered your work. So do think about registering your works. Don't be able to do all of them, it's expensive. The Graphic Artists Guild's trying to get lower options for you, but it is a cornerstone. So I agree with what everybody else has said here, but I think one of the things that we really need to do as a community is we need to start paying attention to what's going on and educating ourselves on it. If you want to understand what the copyright issues behind AI are, what the labor issues are behind AI, go to people who are experts on copyright and labor and are sympathetic to artists' points of view. please don't go to famous artists, because famous artists are wonderful people, but they very often post incorrect things about copyright. Copyright is complicated. You need to go to the sources that understand it to really understand what's going on. I have seen artists pick up the bandwagon and promote absolute myths about copyright because a famous artist said it. It's incredibly damaging to your standing as a professional community. And I'm saying this as a graphic designer, you know, there are good sources, there are good advocates for us. And the next thing we need to do is we need to come together as a community. If there are going to be professional standards and ethical standards, they have to come from us. If we are talking about generative AI for images. Generative AI for images, not generative AI in general. The musicians have different issues than us. The text writers have different issues than us. There are different ways that generative works damage musicians and writers than us. So we have to develop our standards. Sure, there can be global standards for creative industries, but if we're going to parse it down, if we want to be protected, we have to be the ones to set the standards. And we can't do it unless we understand how generative AI works and unless we understand the legal underpinnings behind our rights. So that's the really big thing we need to do. And it's a little bit boring, I'm really sorry, but actually it gets kind of interesting the more you look at it.
Thanks so much. I'm going to follow up on this a bit, secondly asking a question, so I'm going to turn this over to the audience. Raise your hand if you have a question, I will come to you, make sure you tell your name, and you know, what your question is. I think I saw yours first.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jed. I do an illustrator. I dabble in animation, design, occasional photography. And I just want to thank all of our panelists for giving us this very crucial talk. And it's given me personally a lot to think about. But one thing that I really have been turning around in my head, and I would like to put some question to Carl. This is about your passion project, where you are basically like at your father's work and conjuring his spirit.
Yeah.
So it almost sounds like this seems like a very unusual form of, frankly, kind of unprecedented kind of therapy.
Oh, yeah.
It almost sounds like art therapy.
It is. Yeah, it actually, sorry, so there's I'll wait for your question.
Oh, no. I find it ugly. So all this like discussion of like we're losing all the stuff of us as artists, losing our value because our work is being stolen because there's not an automatic plagiarism machine that we can all access using a button in our apps, which we rely on for our livelihood.
Yeah.
With that said, besides that, you are using it as almost as a form of healing processing.
For sure.
Would you want other folks to experience it the way you experience it?
Yeah, the way I'm experiencing it is, it's been a beautiful thing. I mean, it started with a more analog collaboration, right? Like my father died, and I think 2 weeks later, like I took one of his old sketches I found and I just made a copy of it and just drew on top of it. And I hadn't done art in like 7 years since art school, because I built up my studio and hired a bunch of full-time artists. And next thing you know, I'm not even on the art team. So I went on this art healing journey to re-find my own creativity. And yeah, it just evolved over the years. And then when I found out about lore models through my deep, long conversations with Rebecca, extensively trying to learn the advocacy space in the arts. And thank you, Rebecca. You've been absolutely amazing to be mentored by, I should say. But yeah, I was like, well, what if I could make new art with my dad, right? So if like you checked out my YouTube channel, I've been making art Wednesday nights for 3 years, making collaborative pieces with my dad. And I started to run out of sketches to use. And I was like, well, maybe I could just make some new ones in his style with a lore model. And then I just started experimenting. And yeah, it's been like, I mean, it brings me to tears often. And the healing journey is, I don't know, it's powerful. Yeah. Yes, I wish people could experience that part of it. And it's weird because there is that, like, this stuff is soulless and it's whatever. It's like, but that didn't feel soulless. It's weird.
Thank you so much.
I'll get there one day to be able to talk about this.
Can I say one thing about that? And I think that's quite moving and I'm sharing that. That's a personal use, you know, I have no problem with someone doing that. That's beautiful. I think if the surviving Beatle children in 10 years decided to start to create a music generator to make new Beatles stuff, I would be furious. It would ruin it for me, and I wouldn't want to hear it. I would hear some of it, but I would feel that way. So, but if they made it and they were sharing it amongst themselves and listen, I can hear that and all that stuff, that's fine. But I just feel like we as artists, we bring these things that are personal to us. We don't want to see a remix of an author we love. You know, so this is beyond illustration, but this is about creativity and artists and you know, if you, Alex, if you wanted to use your father's art to make something and it was moving to you, it would be great. If you started sharing it everywhere, I'd say, ah, man, I love Robert's work.
But
It's
does it
It's
diminish
actually
the
interesting
original?
that you mentioned that, 'cause, you know, when I started, you know, I've been talking to a lot of artists and so forth. About my dad's work and everything, and I remember speaking with JJ Sotomayor. About
This is Robert Grossman and Alex Grossman's son.
thanks. And he said, you know, so you're gonna use some of your father's animations for this, and he's like, please do not try to recreate or do, you know, because people are like, you know, I mean, doing sort of a documentary on it right now. And people, you know, have said, oh, you gotta have an animation, gotta have new animation in your thing. And I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna try and emulate his stuff or do anything. And I'm also doing a book on it, and I'm surrounded by sketches and all these sorts of things. And it's interesting because I was kind of moved by your story, Carl, but you know, I wouldn't see myself doing that. You know, I mean, I'm trying to kind of further his legacy, but I don't see taking any of his work and trying to, you know, fuck with it in some sort of way as anything that would be advantageous to me or to anybody out there. So I kind of agree with you. I mean, wholeheartedly agree with you, Tim. Thanks.
I guess I personally just don't feel like it diminishes the original. If any way, it celebrates it and it's just something different, right? Like I don't think it takes away if we were gonna make a Beatles album for the like because it's out there, it doesn't mean the other work isn't as magical as it ever was. And maybe this feels less quality or less whatever, but like in this case, when I make these pieces, I'm actually collaborating. Like I'll take these pieces and do collaging and things of that nature and make a whole new piece on top of it. Like I haven't like started publishing a bunch of the ones that like just generate right out of it. It was just interesting to see. So
No, I think that I can say that I think that's beautiful, to make something based on someone who loves work. I have a student at Pratt who's graduated this year, who's made her thesis based on her grandmother's needlepoint. It's beautiful. So I don't have anything in problem. We're talking about we're talking about public things, more public.
Yeah, so it seems like the distinction is personal use versus commercial use. It's much of a personal choice.
I also think what's really key here is attribution.
Yes.
Carl is acknowledging that he's using his father's work through
Mhm.
students acknowledging she's using it. Me.
that's huge.
But the thing that's so dehumanizing with the AI image generators, people's works are being taken and sort of munched into the algorithm without permission and without any attribution.
Well, and to be clear, if somebody else did that with my dad's art, I'd be furious.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Just wanted to bring it back.
Of course.
We have a question, we have a couple of questions in the audience. Sorry.
My name is Steve, I'm an illustrator and I teach at this field. I'm very concerned not about people really loving AI, because, as has been pointed out here tonight, people are not loving the automatic use of the robots, the art. Doesn't touch the definition. But what I am concerned about is our kids. Kids who are being conditioned to find everything quick and easy and everybody can do it. And the reason they're in art school is not because they have been spending their lives doing something crazy, it's because they enjoy making art. I'm concerned that administrations will find it intimidating to hold the line on you and say to them, you can use this in your free time or when you graduate, any way you like. But when you're in here, you're gonna learn skills. And Tim and I are illustrators, which means that you are combining ideas in complicated ways that have to do with experience, emotion, and intellect. A robot has never had an experience, and never will. And as of right now, I need that I'd like to have this discussion in the panel of holding the line in schools. And how can we frame the new technology? Let's face it, the trillions of dollars that will be poured into this. It's going to dominate in so many parts of the economy. It's going to upturn,
It is.
destroy everything that we know of, create new forms. But in art schools, we are endangering our culture and the intellectual growth of our kids and our society by taking skills which can be easily done with falling back on the easy, which is definitely including. So I'd like to hear what you all.
I actually would love to answer this. So the thing that gives me a little bit of encouragement is there are some artists who are using AI, generative AI, entirely creating works on, well, one of them is not really, creating works largely on platform. And they're creating works that have a vision and an integrity and a narrative. Paul Laidler, I don't know if you saw his talk at ICON. But I think in order to create works like that, and if I look at these works, I mean, I've actually come across a work on the internet, like, oh my God, that was done by Paul, and it was. That wasn't an easy task. It wasn't an issue of just putting in text prompts and gosh, oh golly, this popped out. There was, first of all, I'm sure there was an iterative process, but the conceptualizing, the intellectual rigor that went behind the creation of those images, to use generative AI to produce something that has creativity and value, it should not be a shortcut. It'll be a shortcut for the kid who doesn't want to learn how to do watercolors and he wants to use generative AI to spit out something that's like a watercolor, sure. But to actually use it to create something with integrity, you need that. You need to have that mindset, that creativity. Another person is Jessica Helfand, who's been doing a series of studies of immigrants, laborers. And they're beautiful. And what she's done is she's actually trained a model on, I think she collected a lot of vintage photographs. I don't know what her generative AI process was, but then the output she then recreates is in oil paintings, which is this incredibly beautiful series of portraits. And again, you see one at a distance, you're like, there's integrity behind it, there's a vision behind it. So done correctly, it should not give people a shortcut. Having said that, my tremendous fear is, I think what you touch on, is that students are going to want to use it not to do the hard labor in developing the skills, and that is a tremendous problem. But the other problem I find, and I'm almost done, Tim, I promise, The other thing I'm worried about is generative AI is removing the low hanging fruit. The illustration projects that are the bread and butter of people coming fresh out of college. And if that is the case, then who's going to be able to afford an illustration background, an illustration education? Because you're going to be entering into a marketplace where you're basically going to have to support yourself with some other source of funding until you get to that sweet spot where you are actually able to earn a living. And if that is the case, then does this mean that our illustration students are going to be coming from prosperous backgrounds? And if that is the case, then what does that do to the representation in our illustration student body? Because that's the seed corn. That's where our cultural richness comes from. What is it going to do to the ethnic diversity, the educational backgrounds, the economic diversity of our student bodies? Those are the things I do really worry about.
Okay,
Sorry.
I like you, Steve, I've been teaching a long time, I think 34 years for me, I think you've done quite a few more, right?
Same teacher.
Yeah. So I have a good perspective on how hard my students work. Did they work harder in the past? Do they work harder now? My students work really hard now. And the thing that I found very interesting since 2020 is that more of them are wanting to go back to hand skills. They're feeling anonymous and sort of hidden behind the Procreate and the Photoshop and the onset of easy image generation. They wanted to make it with their own hands. And much to my chagrin, because that just drives me crazy, because I have to like teach them how to use things and make gradations by hand. And it's hard work. But they're not afraid of the hard work, and the work that they're doing is quite beautiful. So that's the student part of it. I'm not worried about the students. I'm worried about the schools. The schools have been dangled a very shiny little object. We see, and most of the emails and signage that you see when you teach at an institution is, we're having a session teaching you how to incorporate AI into your workflow, teaching you how to incorporate. What's the incentive for the school? Why do they feel that they have to do that? Well, they're afraid of being behind the 8 ball. They want to promise their parents that their students be prepared. And these are student replacement tools. These are illustration replacement tools. The school is trying to teach people to be illustrators. And so I made my job, and since I stopped being the president of this place, to be more involved with the school, and I joined the Pratt Senate, and I joined the AI committee, and we had to create some guardrails. And mostly what I did was look at language, how we use language. How do we talk about it? If we say AI should be used this way, and I insert the line, if you choose to. I made sure that it is still presented as an option. And I never want any language to be put out there that says that it's assumed that we should, and it's gonna be part of your workflow. It should, if you choose to, and it has to align with the learning outcomes of a course. So if you have a painting course that's supposed to teach someone how to paint something, we don't crack out the image generator. If you're working in your architecture part of the school and you need to generate ideas, they might have a different lens. But anything that teaches students how to make things, it's really not, it's not really part of it. And I don't really know any students that are very, very interested in using it. And anyway, most schools have a rule that says you have to attribute. And if you have to attribute the work to AI, it's another badge of shame. And no one wants to do that. They barely want me to help them with their work. In fact, if I draw on one of their pieces, they hate it all of a sudden. They wanna make their own thing. So I'm not worried about the students, I'm worried about the schools, and the schools are being a little bit dazzled right now, and I think things are evening out. There's fewer signs in the elevators.
I just want to say that we had a SVA, we had a conference in AI, it was all skewed to pro AI.
Yeah, of course.
This was disturbing to me, and our provost seemed squishy that day. Meanwhile, now, I guess it's because of the conversation we've had, there is in the rule book and the
bylaws and, when the kids get introduced in school, no AI tolerated, period, in the rule. So, it's good to have the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, just as this administration stays there, we're gonna be all right, but stay with you.
Yeah, and I'd like to comment on this as well. I feel like every evolution in technologies had this fear, right? You know, when we went from you know transfer paper and grease pencil animation to digital animation and computers, there's a big fear that we're gonna ruin it and there's gonna be the skills are gonna get lost. This is a new tool. There's issues with the data set for sure. We've discussed that pretty extensively. But as ethical data sets come about and they're being worked on, they'll be here eventually. I think it's important that artists learn these tools in the idea that they need to be it's going to become a new craft. It's not going to replace illustration or painting, just like beautiful graphite drawings weren't replaced by photography like we were afraid it was going to happen when that came through. This is going to be a new type of art, and it isn't like, oh, I punched in the keyboard and made a rainbow unicorn like that. You're not an artist all of a sudden. But much the way that a collage artist makes something transformative, you can make something transformative with AI. I've done it personally. I have pieces of art on my website right now that I spent 9-10 hours conceptualizing using images that I rendered. It's not like a big, like, I'm not, you know, trying to license them out anywhere or anything, but I'm experimenting because I know this is the economy that I'm in, right? I still have a policy with my business where we don't put out any AI generated pixels to any of our clients within my business, but as an individual, like I know this is the economy we're in. This is the world that's moving forward. I'm up here advocating for doing it the right way and navigating that conversation in the right way and being part of these, you know, like the graphic artist guild and making sure that, you know, there's a saying in the advocacy space that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Like we're at the table. So yeah, I think this is a new tool. There will be people in the coming years that are become renowned artists that do amazing work that are using generative AI, but it isn't just punching in a prompt. It's conceptualizing an idea, it's deep layers of collaging and manipulation. And we'll see that. Like I'm 100% positive of that. Like, will some people hate it? Yes, they should. I would love that. I want people to be vocal about that, right? Like that's how culture evolves. That's how technology evolves alongside of it. I love that the Society of Illustrators has a no AI policy. They need that. We should keep that here. So yeah.
Just throw a little dash of cold water on what you just said,
Okay.
Carl, which is just to point out that there actually has been a shift in the labor market.
Sure.
The Association of Illustrators in UK did a report, they do it biannually, and the 2023 report already showed that there was a significant loss of income back then among illustrators due to generative AI. The World Economic Forum came out with their every other year report. And in that report, if you went back 2 years ago, they indicated that graphic design was showing moderate growth. Well, this year it is the 11th at highest risk of declining incomes, declining growth because of generative AI. It's done a hairpin turn. So I am not saying that the future is all bleak, but I am saying we are going to have to address the labor issues and the monetizing issues and the collective licensing issues in order to protect our careers so that we can actually learn these tools and become leaders and do everything else we need to do.
And the good news is we're not in that alone. That's happening across so many industries, like we talked about earlier. So.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. So I want to give Ismail final words.
Really briefly, Steve, hi, I can't see you, that's fine. Thank you for coming. I want you to leave from this event with a bit of a less fear about what's going on, or at the very least, a bit more understanding of where that fear comes from, if I can. I'm gonna play therapist for a second. The fear is from two places. Tim's already pointed to one. Universities and schools are being bombarded by the AI companies. They're being sold absolutely every generative AI tool. It is brutal. On this, Ben Williamson from the University of Edinburgh on LinkedIn is a great person to follow if that's something you want to learn more about. The other thing, there have been discounts or free, some of the AI tools have been given for free to students during exam periods. That's just a thing that's happening now, right? So schools and students are being bombarded by this thing, and that's the source of it. Now, I think to Tim and Carl, what they said about, okay, the kids want to get their hands dirty, and Carl was speaking about we need to hone in on our AI or on our artistic skills. And yes, we might or might not use AI in the future, but we need to hone in on our artistic skills first and further. That's what's most important. I think the child that makes it through school, just blur and kind of does it and just goes through the whole process, comes to class and stares out the window, but then passes the exam with a, I don't know how you grade in the US, but with a 50% mark or whatever. That student's always going to exist. I've never had any interest in that student. I don't know how you guys as teachers can actually manage that student. I think you're all very impressive, but AI is just another thing that, if anything, emphasizes some structural issues about education. Yes, exams and some of the teaching isn't meant for every single student. Children will learn in their own different ways, and we need to be, I don't know enough about the pedagogy to actually bring anything useful to this conversation, but all I want to say is you are doing an impressive job. And it's good that we are aware of what AI might mean for the education process, but the education process itself is what you are going to be best at improving. So yeah, like Carl saying, focus on honing in on your artistic skills. I'm going to say, whatever you do in life, if you're a teacher, if you're an artist, whatever, focus on those skills, on the structural issues that are already in place, because there are plenty already. So let's do some meaningful
Thanks
work.
so much, Ismail. So the reason I wanted to give him final words is because we are actually going to kind of end this formal panel portion and just, mingle the gallery here with our panelists, and you can feel free to ask them any further in the discussion. Ismail, of course, will not be able to join us, so he will be saying bye from Canada, and we'll be mingling and drinking. But thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks for
Thanks all. Goodbye.
Yeah, it's-